On August 26, 2013, the fall semester commenced at Sierra College in Rocklin, California. Enrollment records confirm that 19-year-old Bryce Laspisa was registered for classes, focusing on graphic and industrial design. According to housing logs, he resided in an apartment on the north side of Rocklin, a suburb located approximately 20 miles northeast of Sacramento. Up to this point in the timeline, academic transcripts and family statements indicated a standard trajectory for a sophomore student. There were no prior police reports or significant medical interventions on file that suggested an impending crisis. However, over the subsequent 48 hours, witness statements and telecommunications data would document a rapid and unexplained shift in behavior. The timeline of the case begins to fragment on August 27th. According to statements provided later to investigators by his roommate and his girlfriend, the individual involved began consuming Vyvanse, a stimulant medication prescribed for the treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is noted in the investigative file that Laspisa did not have a valid prescription for this substance. While toxicology reports could not be obtained to verify the levels of this compound, witness testimony stands as the primary evidence for its consumption during this window. Between August 27th and August 28th, records indicate a series of erratic interpersonal exchanges. The girlfriend of the subject reported to authorities that Laspisa admitted to taking the medication to stay awake for video games. Following this admission, a text message log shows that he ended his relationship with her via SMS, claiming she would be better off without him. This communication was sent at a time when cell tower data placed him within his residence. Simultaneously, the roommate provided a sworn statement detailing a specific interaction regarding personal property. On August 28th, Laspisa offered to give away a high-value gaming console, an Xbox, along with several games. When the roommate declined the offer, Laspisa insisted. Further inventory of his possessions later revealed that he had removed a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from his mother, from his belongings, and given them to his girlfriend. The transfer of high-value assets without compensation is often flagged by behavioral analysts as a significant marker. Yet, at the time, no external authorities were notified. On the evening of August 28th, the timeline shifts to vehicular movement. At approximately 11:30 in the evening, Laspisa departed his apartment in Rocklin. He was operating a beige 2003 Toyota Highlander. Based on standard route analysis, the drive from Rocklin to his parents' residence in Laguna Niguel is approximately 450 miles, a transit that typically requires 7 to 8 hours via the Interstate 5 corridor. Under normal driving conditions, he was projected to arrive in Laguna Niguel by the early morning of August 29th. However, phone records indicate that Laspisa did not travel directly south. While the specific GPS data for the initial leg of the trip is limited, call logs show he contacted his mother at 1 in the morning on August 29th. In this conversation, he stated he was pulling off the road to sleep. Investigators noted that at this specific time, he was in an area significantly north of where a 2-hour drive should have placed him, suggesting either a delayed departure or a deviation from the primary route. The procedural timeline creates a significant gap between 1 in the morning and 9 in the morning on August 29th. There is no digital footprint, no credit card usage, no outgoing calls, and no toll booth records during this 8-hour window. The next confirmed data point occurred at 9 in the morning. Financial records show a credit card transaction for gasoline and beverages in Buttonwillow, California. Buttonwillow is located in Kern County, approximately 230 miles south of Rocklin. A standard drive would have covered this distance in less than 4 hours. The discrepancy of 4 to 5 unaccounted hours remains a focal point of the file. Following the transaction in Buttonwillow, the situation entered a phase of static observation. Instead of continuing south toward Laguna Niguel, Laspisa parked the Toyota Highlander. Local surveillance and witness accounts placed the vehicle near the Buttonwillow rest area and surrounding service roads for an extended period. At 12:30 in the afternoon on August 29th, a call was placed to a roadside assistance service. The account was registered to the parents, Mike and Karen Laspisa. The service request indicated that the subject had run out of fuel. This contradicts the financial record from 9 in the morning, which showed a purchase of $20 in fuel. Investigators questioned whether the fuel was discarded, never pumped, or if the vehicle had been driven extensively in a localized area to deplete the tank. A roadside assistance technician, identified in reports as Christian, arrived at the location in Buttonwillow. According to the technician's log, he delivered 3 gallons of gasoline. Christian later reported to law enforcement that he physically observed the driver. He noted that Laspisa appeared lucid but immobile. After the fuel was delivered, the technician observed that Laspisa did not immediately depart. The technician processed the payment and left the scene, but the Toyota Highlander remained stationary. At this juncture, the parents were notified of the roadside assistance claim. Phone records show repeated attempts by the parents to contact Laspisa. Conversation logs indicate that he spoke with his mother and claimed he was getting back on the road. However, cell tower triangulation data confirmed that the device had not moved from the Buttonwillow sector. Concerned by the lack of movement and the contradiction between the subject's statements and the timeline, the family contacted the California Highway Patrol at approximately 6 in the evening. A welfare check was initiated. Official police logs confirm that patrol units located the beige Toyota Highlander shortly thereafter. It was parked on a roadside access point near the interstate. Officers approached the vehicle and engaged with Laspisa. The police report filed regarding this interaction states that the officers conducted a field interview. They assessed the subject for signs of intoxication. According to the filed report, Laspisa passed the field sobriety test. The officers noted no illegal items in plain view within the cabin. The officers conducted a search of the vehicle with the subject's consent. According to the report, nothing illicit was recovered. The officers then instructed Laspisa to exit the vehicle and performed a physical evaluation. Finding no grounds for detention under the penal code or criteria for an involuntary psychiatric hold, the officers allowed him to return to his vehicle. The report indicates that the officers advised him to rest if he was tired, but ultimately cleared the scene. One officer contacted the parents to inform them that contact had been made. The individual was physically well, and he was cleared to drive. This interaction is a critical node in the procedural analysis. The law enforcement personnel operated within their jurisdictional limits without evidence of a crime or an immediate threat to safety. They could not compel the subject to move or to exit the vehicle permanently. The subject remained in Buttonwillow. It was not until hours later that the vehicle began to move again. Christian, the roadside assistance technician, returned to the area after his shift ended, prompted by a call from the concerned family. He located Laspisa still parked in the same vicinity. At this point, it was late into the evening of August 29th. The technician sat in his own vehicle nearby and watched the Toyota Highlander to ensure the subject began to drive. Finally, the vehicle merged onto Interstate 5, heading south. The timeline moves to the early morning hours of August 30th. At 1:50 in the morning, phone records show Laspisa contacted his mother again. He stated he was on Interstate 5 and saw a sign for the 5 Golden State Freeway. This placed him in the vicinity of Castaic Lake, approaching the steep grade known as the Grapevine. At 2 in the morning, Laspisa placed another call to his parents. He stated he was tired and was pulling off the road to sleep. He mentioned he was in a residential area, but could not provide a specific address. Cell tower data from this call pinged off a tower near Castaic Lake, a reservoir located in the Sierra Pelona Mountains of northwestern Los Angeles County. This was the final outgoing communication from the device. The logistical data ends here. The distance from Buttonwillow to Castaic is approximately 85 miles. The drive should have taken 90 minutes. The time elapsed between the technician watching him leave Buttonwillow and the final phone call was significantly longer than the necessary travel time, implying further unexplained stops or low-speed travel. At 5:30 in the morning on August 30th, the California Highway Patrol received a notification regarding a vehicular incident at Castaic Lake. A cyclist had observed a vehicle at the bottom of a steep ravine near the main boat launch road. Upon arrival, responding personnel located the beige Toyota Highlander lying on its passenger side. The vehicle had left the roadway, crashed through a chain-link barrier, and tumbled approximately 25 feet down the embankment before coming to a rest. Investigators arrived to process the location. The rear window of the vehicle had been shattered. Analysis of the glass distribution suggested the window had been broken from the inside, indicating the force was applied outward. This detail suggested the occupant may have exited the vehicle through this opening after the incident. Photographs of the interior documented the presence of the subject's cellular phone, a wallet, and a laptop computer. Additionally, the duffel bag containing the clothing and personal effects was located within the cabin. Forensic processing of the vehicle interior revealed a small amount of biological fluid on the headrest, the passenger seat, and the deployed airbags. Samples were collected for analysis, which later confirmed a match to the missing student. However, the volume of blood was inconsistent with a fatal injury. The evidence indicated that while the occupant had sustained an injury during the descent, the trauma was likely not incapacitating. Crucially, the primary subject of the investigation, Bryce Laspisa, was not located within the vehicle or in the immediate vicinity of the collision. The procedural search radius was immediately expanded. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department assumed jurisdiction over the search, deploying ground teams to canvass the dense brush surrounding the lake. The geography of the area presented significant challenges. The terrain around Castaic Lake is characterized by steep ridges, rocky outcrops, and heavy vegetation. Simultaneously, a dive team was mobilized to examine the waters of the lake itself. At the time of the investigation, the water levels were lower than average due to drought conditions, which allowed divers to scan the shoreline depths with greater efficiency. Sonar equipment was utilized to map the lake bed near the crash site. Records from the dive team indicate that no objects consistent with a person were detected in the water. Canine units were brought to the location to establish a scent trail. According to the handler reports, the dogs successfully picked up a scent from the vehicle. The track led the animals away from the overturned Highlander and down toward the edge of the lake. However, at the waterline, the scent trail abruptly terminated. This specific detail created a divergence in the investigative theories. One possibility considered by detectives was that the individual had entered the water and drifted beyond the range of the initial sonar sweep. Alternatively, if the scent led back toward the paved access road near the lake's government station, it could imply the individual entered another vehicle at that location. The investigation then turned to the tire tracks. Accident reconstruction specialists analyzed the friction marks on the asphalt and the dirt shoulder. The preliminary report suggested that the vehicle did not brake prior to leaving the roadway. The angle of entry into the ravine was 40 degrees. The lack of evasive maneuvers remained the primary technical factor, distinguishing this event from a standard accidental roadway departure. The evidence recorded at the scene suggested the accelerator was engaged until the moment of impact with the terrain. Further analysis of the vehicle's black box data was requested to confirm the velocity and braking inputs. The absence of skid marks was a critical evidentiary detail noted in the initial accident report. The investigation shifted from a traffic collision analysis to a missing person inquiry, classified under suspicious circumstances due to the behavioral lead-up and the empty vehicle. The timeline of the vehicle's movements was further refined using a license plate reader located near the lake entrance. The camera captured the Toyota Highlander ascending the road at 2:15 in the morning. This timestamp is significant as it correlates with the conclusion of the final phone call to his parents. The camera logs do not show the vehicle descending the road at any point subsequent to 2:15. This discrepancy established a 3-hour window between the vehicle entering the area and the discovery of the collision at 5:30. Investigators had to account for the subject's activities during this interval. It remained unclear whether the crash occurred immediately after the 2:15 entry, leaving the vehicle undiscovered for 3 hours, or if Laspisa remained in the area for that duration before the collision occurred. Forensic teams processed the vehicle for additional context. The fuel gauge indicated the tank was nearly empty, suggesting the 3 gallons provided in Buttonwillow had been consumed during the transit to Castaic. There was no note or written communication found within the cabin. The timeline of the investigation also notes a critical piece of evidence discovered days later. A burned patch of ground was located near the roadway where the car was found. Analysis of the soil revealed traces of a slow-burning flare. This detail added complexity to the timeline, raising questions about whether the flare was deployed by Laspisa during the 3-hour window between his arrival and the discovery of the crash. Investigators reviewed the dashcam footage from the Kern County deputy who had performed the welfare check in Buttonwillow. The footage was scrutinized for any signs of impairment or distress that might have been overlooked. The official report maintained that the subject appeared coherent and compliant, limiting the ability of law enforcement to intervene prior to the incident at Castaic Lake. By September 4th, 5 days after the discovery of the vehicle, the search radius was expanded. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department utilized mounted patrols to traverse the rugged trails inaccessible to vehicles. Aerial units equipped with thermal imaging technology conducted night sweeps of the recreation area. The thermal scans were intended to detect the heat signature of a person in the wilderness. The flight logs from these operations reported negative results. No heat signatures consistent with a human presence were identified within the primary search grid. During the second week of the investigation, detectives interviewed close associates and family members to build a psychological profile. Witness statements indicated that in the days prior to the disappearance, the subject had exhibited uncharacteristic behavior. Academic records from his university indicated he had been dismissed from classes earlier that week. Additionally, friends reported that he had given away personal possessions before beginning his drive south. These actions were noted in the file as potential indicators of a despondent state or a planned departure. Though no note or explicit message confirming intent was ever located, toxicology screenings were impossible without the individual present. But investigators reviewed the subject's medical history and known substance use. Witness testimony contained in the file suggested the subject had been consuming alcohol and a prescription stimulant during the day leading up to the crash. The combination of these substances, along with the severe sleep deprivation implied by the 20-hour activity window, led investigators to consider the possibility of a chemically induced medical episode. This hypothesis offered a potential explanation for the erratic driving and the hours spent stationary in Buttonwillow. On September 10th, authorities announced a scaling back of the active search operation. The status of the case remained classified as a voluntary disappearance in some jurisdictions due to the subject's age. Although the California Highway Patrol maintained the file as a traffic collision investigation, the ambiguity of the classification affected the resources available for long-term tracking. Without evidence of a specific criminal act involving a second party, the procedural levers for obtaining wider warrants were limited. In the months following the incident, the investigation shifted to sighting verification. A tip line established for the case received numerous reports. One specific report detailed a sighting in Oregon where a witness claimed to have spoken with a young man resembling the subject. The witness stated the individual seemed disoriented. Law enforcement followed up on this lead, reviewing security footage from the location in question. The analysis of the video was inconclusive. While the general physical characteristics matched, resolution quality prevented a positive identification. Another significant lead involved a potential sighting in the town of Castaic itself, occurring shortly after the crash. A resident reported seeing a young man walking away from the vicinity of the lake in the early morning hours. This sighting aligned with the K9 unit's trail ending at the roadway. However, despite canvassing local businesses and reviewing footage from transit stations, no further digital footprint was discovered. There were no credit card transactions, no bank withdrawals, and no reactivation of the cellular device after the morning of August 30th. Detectives also scrutinized the individual's financial records. Bank statements reviewed by the task force showed no activity on credit or debit cards following the date of the incident. There were no withdrawals, no transit purchases, and no digital logins to banking applications. The complete cessation of financial activity is a primary marker used by investigators to determine if a missing person is surviving independently. In this case, the financial trail went cold at the exact moment the vehicle left the road. Procedurally, the case encountered friction due to jurisdictional overlap. The crash occurred in an area patrolled by the Highway Patrol. The disappearance fell under the Sheriff's Department, and the subject's residence and family were located in Orange County. Records indicate that communication between these agencies was maintained, but the fragmented nature of the location data where he lived, where he was last seen, and where the car was found created logistical hurdles in the centralization of the file. Forensic teams conducted a final thorough processing of the Highlander before it was released from impound. They re-examined the deployment of the airbags and the seatbelt mechanism. The findings confirmed the seatbelt was likely not worn at the moment of impact, or it had been disengaged immediately. The pattern of dust displacement on the dashboard was consistent with a person moving across the center console. This physical evidence reinforced the conclusion that the individual was mobile following the incident. As the 1-year mark approached, the investigation grew dormant. The tangible evidence remained limited to the vehicle, the phone, and the scent trail that ended at the water. The file noted that without new physical evidence, specifically the recovery of the individual or definitive proof of life elsewhere, the investigation could not advance to a closure phase. To date, the records maintained by the Department of Justice list the status as an open missing person case. The timeline established by the digital footprints and the physical state of the vehicle remains the primary document of record, detailing a sequence of events that stops abruptly at the shoreline of Castaic Lake. The investigation established a clear sequence of actions leading up to the crash, but failed to recover the data necessary to explain the sequence of actions that followed. The tangible records, the phone logs showing the 13-hour wait, the police report clearing him for travel, and the accident reconstruction report showing no braking, stand as the sole documentation of the event.